Well. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Rec Poker Forums Edition podcast. I am again your host, Chris Jones. I am filling in for our hero, Jim Reed, while he tackles the WSOP and makes some deep runs, playing cash, living the dream, having breakfast with Rec Poker members, and the meetup games coming up on June 28th as well. So it may actually have already happened by the time this episode comes out, but he's having a great time. And we are filling in, doing the Rec Poker podcast. As always, we are sponsored by the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And we are looking forward to Rec Poker days at Running Aces on August 4th and 5th coming up. So if you're tuning in and you can make it and join us, we'll have tournaments, we'll have activities, we'll have just members gathering to sort of get to know each other. If you've never met some folks in Rec Poker, it's a really fun time. It's a really fun way to gather, and we're really looking forward to that. And we're thankful and grateful to Running Aces for being a key partner and sponsor all these years. But we could not make this show just alone, and we always need our Wrecking Crew members to help us out. Tonight I'm joined by one of our most illustrious Wrecking Crew members. Rob, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 just about everywhere.
Awesome. Well, tonight, Rob and I are going to talk about a hand that I think is a fairly straightforward hand until we get to the river. And I think this is a really common spot where we have to make a decision, particularly when we're out of position. So we're in a situation, we're out of position. And we have to decide how to approach a hand when we have value. So I'll kind of fill you in on where we're at in this tournament and what's going on. We are in the money, yay, and we are fairly. It's kind of like. The bubble has burst. The bonanza of all the short stacks, kind of like everyone getting all in, it has kind of ended. We're kind of in that phase that's sort of after the post bubble bonanza, but not necessarily really close to the end. There's about, if I remember, at this point there's about 45 players left in what was like a 700 person tournament. So we're getting down to it, but we're not there yet, and we're trying to make a run to get towards a final table here. So before I set the stage anymore, any things to say about that, Rob, and thoughts about that stage of the tournament?
I think the ICM pressure is not as great there in that section of the tournament. I mean, the bubbles burst, so that is one place where there's a lot of ICM consideration. The next is really at the final table, because that's where the big payoffs are going to start. So I think right now you're probably at a very level area where, there'd be 9 or so people all getting the same payout, and not a lot of laddering going on.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't think ICM is as strong here as it will be later in the tournament.
Yep. So here we are plugging along. We have 28 big blinds. We are in the big blind ourselves. And it folds around to the button. The button has 27 big blinds themselves. And they elect to open a min open to 2 big blinds. The intervening small blind, who is quite short, about 7.5 big blinds, folds. So it's to us. We cover the button, but barely. And we have ace of diamonds, 3 of spades, which we elect to defend. I think that we could actually, this is a kind of hand you can sometimes 3-bet with a little, especially against a late position open. This is a player who has not, I don't have a ton of hands on them. Has not been sort of too wildly trying to steal blinds yet, but we don't have enough hands to really make those kind of assessments about them. And I elect to take sort of the lower variance decision here and just flat out of the big blind. But I think this is a spot where we want to have some three bets sometimes with the ace blocker. Rob, anything you want to add to that, Rob?
No, I think it's a good call. I'm looking at the stats. Now there's only 30 hands, but is that 27, 21, 14.3 is a
Yep.
three bet percentage? Okay.
Yep. And
So
there,
he's pretty active. I mean, he's not, he's not limping. He's raising and he's three betting quite a bit.
yep, yep. And with like that, I think that's one of those things that we can notice, but we can't really for sure say like they could have just been hit with the deck. But
Right.
there's certainly they're certainly three betting quite a bit. There's certainly been pretty active. They've called every time somebody has raised them in the big blind. They've never cold called anybody's bet other than when in the big blind. So they've been fairly active here for sure. So that's something to definitely take note of. But we do elect to defend, and the flop comes ace of hearts, five of spades, four of clubs. So again, we are holding ace of diamonds, three of spades. It's a nice flop for us. We have flop top pair and a gut shot. But of course our opponent can have a lot of dominating aces in this kind of spot. So it's one we want to also be a little bit careful with as we progress. I would probably universally check any ace high flop as the out of position player, especially the out of position player who called. So I do. And our villain into a 5.5 big blind pot bets a little under two big blinds, 1.75 big blinds into that pot. Again, we've got a rainbow flop, top pair with a gutter. I don't know if there's any real choice here but to call this small bet. But Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd call here. Now I notice it's exactly 1/3 pot, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that he's set up his buttons to be 1/3. So that tells me that he's probably somewhat of a studied player to have that actual button that he can just push and boom, 1/3.
Yep.
So this continuation bet could be made with his entire range on this board.
Yeah, and on ace high flop, yeah, it seems
Yeah, an ace high flop, yeah. Hoping to get, basically, right, you're trying to get value. Either you have an ace and you're hoping to get some called from a worse ace, or you're trying to deny equity to somebody who has a 6-7 or something like that, some sort of draw. So yeah, I think this is probably a pretty standard bet, and we can't really diminish anything in his range yet. This could be everything in his range.
Yep, I agree.
So I think a call here is definitely warranted.
Yeah, and we do elect to call. And so the board then, the turn is the 7 of spades. So now there are 2 spades on the board, 5 of spades, ace of hearts, 4 of clubs, 7 of spades. And we are holding the ace of diamonds with the 3 of spades. We do have a spade. I don't know if that matters here. We check again, which I think is just, I don't think there's probably much of a reason to sort of jump in here. I mean, we certainly have more 6-8 than they do. So we're certainly have sort of a bit of a nuts advantage, but I don't think that really means we want to take our ace and wake up and start betting here too much of the time. So I do check. And then into this about 9 big blind pot, they bet about 6 big blinds. So they've gone from that sort of 1/3 sizing to about a 2/3 sizing. And again, we've got ace of diamonds, 3 of spades. We have 25 behind. We've got to put in about 6. Thoughts?
Again, a very typical sizing for the turn, right? Um, now what's he trying to do? What is he double barreling just because he wants us to fold all those fours or fives that we might have in our range? Why is he double barreling? Is he double barreling as a bluff,
Mm-hmm.
or does he have value here? And I
Mm-hmm.
guess hard to know. I mean, he's been, like you say, he's been very active. So yeah, it's hard to say what he's got here. What I think is interesting is that we have actually a double gutter here
Yep. Yep.
because we a six or a deuce is going to give us a straight.
Yep.
It this could almost be a check raise here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you think about that. It's something to think about, though. We do have the ace. Um, Basically, I think we have outs to any three, any two, and any six.
Yep.
That very seldom is he going to have a hand that's going to connect with any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to have a lot of ace kings, ace queens, ace jacks, ace tens, those types of hands. Does he do this with a pocket pair of kings, queens, jacks, tens? I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. You know, I really did ponder the raise here, and I did decide in game that actually I would want that as the big blind in this hand, that I am very capable of having other threes. I'm capable of having three deuce suited, 3-4 suited, 3-5 suited, and some sixes that don't have some of the sort of the ace value here. And that those I thought were the ones that I would probably want to turn into some check raises rather than turning my ace into that. But I could, I mean, I could be convinced that it's an interesting check raise for sure.
yeah, it's possible, but like you say, you have that ace, so you do have some showdown value.
Right.
If he is getting juicy with another pocket pair, or maybe a hand like I don't know what, 8-9,
Mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
maybe a couple of spades
Yep.
that maybe
Yep.
has, yeah, maybe has a couple of spades, king, queen of spades, king, queen, jack of spades, that type of hand.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So we do elect to call. And then I think this is where this hand gets the most interesting to me. So perhaps it's interesting to me because we really improve here. The river is the 2 of clubs. So we now have the wheel straight with our 3. And there's really no reason to believe that it's even. I mean, if they had 3-6, they were already beating us. And it's hard to believe that that's sort of what they have. I mean, if they have 3-6, good GG. So but I find myself in this spot a lot, where we're up against an opponent, we're out of position, and we've now hit some gin value on the river. Sometimes this happens with flush draws, sometimes this happens with straight draws, where we're just like pretty sure now there's no way our opponent is going to be beating us. But what is the best way to get value out of an opponent? And this is, I think, one of these river spots that is really tricky to figure out. Like, is this a spot where we want to bet small to induce some kind of raises from some big aces? Is this a spot where we want to check to get those kinds of hands that we can blast off against to induce some bluffs? Or do we want to bet big and try to capture value from like the ace king, ace queens of the world? And if big, do we shove or something else? And I think those are so again, there's about a pot size, about 20 big blinds. We got a pot size bet behind. And effectively the pot is a little bit more. There's 20 big blinds in the middle, and our opponent has 17 big blinds behind. So with all that kind of said, what kind of stage of the tournament we're in. Rob, what are your thoughts about the best way to, and I know this is probably opponent dependent, but like, what's the best way to approach capturing value in this kind of spot?
I've been working a lot lately, on the book study, and we're talking about value to bluff ratios. So what we recommend first is what value do we have? How many value hands do we have that we would bet here? Mm-hmm. Then you have to look at, okay, based on the range of hands I arrived here with, what value do I have? And then what bluffs would I have? And that kind of informs you of how much you can bet. Because the bigger you bet, the more value, the more bluffs you can have. So if you look at your value, I mean, if your value right now is what, 3-6, I don't know what else gets here. Other than we have the three, the ace 3, 3-6,
I probably
6,
have
8,
3-4 and 3-5, the suited kinds.
Yep.
Some of those I think are in there for sure.
Yep. So if we can figure out how many combos of value that we have, and what do we have? Maybe 10, 15, maybe more than that, maybe 20. So if we have 20, let's just say we have 20 combos of value. If we make a pot size bet, we would need to have at least 10 bluff hands. Mm-hmm. 10 combos of bluffs. Do we have 10 combos of bluffs here? I suppose we could if we included all the different aces, or all the different spade draws that we could have had.
Yep.
So we could basically represent enough bluffs to probably put a pot size bet in here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, is our opponent thinking at that level?
Right. Well, and the other question I have, so like that, I think that's one very like starting. I love the way you're like starting to think about, how do we balance out what kinds of hands we can bet here. On the flip side, right, we have an opponent who has so like there, that I think is there's a strong case for we need to do the betting for our opponent. Let's not let them just get a free card. If they've got, ace 10 here, don't let them just check back here. So that's one case. But the other side is that this has been an opponent who's double barreled, who's shown, we have limited stats on them, but we've shown them to be an active player. At least that's what our perception is so far. And what are our opponent's potential bluffs that they arrive here with that they want to turn into bluffs, that have like no showdown value, that they don't want to check back. And I think it's a lot of spade combos that maybe that took a line, then got that spade on the turn. Now they've got like king, queen, king, jack, queen, jack, jack 10, those kinds of spade holdings are interesting. But are there enough of those that if we check through here, that they're going to blast off at us? So, and if there aren't, are they going to blast off on us with a good ace? And I think those are some of the questions that I was having when I did. So do you want to know what I did, or do you want to talk about that more?
Well, let's talk about it from the other side then.
Yeah.
So if we look at it, how many value hands does he have? At least the value hands he's going to perceive as value, because obviously we know that we really have the nuts here.
Right.
Because there's no hand that can beat us that he would arrive at this spot
Yeah.
with. So,
He's got all the
what?
sets.
Yeah,
Right?
he has all the sets. Well, yeah, I don't know if he has fours or deuces. Yeah, he could.
I
He
think he
could.
does in this spot on the button. I think he's opening
Yeah.
those on the
Yep.
button. I don't know if he gets
Yep.
deuces. Deuces might not double barrel, but I
No,
think
deuces wouldn't be here unless
fives,
he was doing it based on the gut shot, you know?
right. Fives, aces, fours, and sevens probably all make that small bet on the flop and then barrel on the turn.
Okay.
Um, he probably has the two pair combos like ace five, ace four, ace seven. And he's got good aces are
Yep.
probably the strong value.
So he's got enough value that he could decide to bet out with his perceived value. And we don't really even have to look for really bluffs here, do we?
Not necessarily. I mean that was so that was part as I was sitting here, I was like, do I bet or do I not? Do I bet? Do I not? And ultimately I decided that the that it's gonna really stink when they check back ace 10, but that my best approach was what I thought was to check here and allow them to do the betting for me because they've shown an interest and because they do have a decent amount of value and bluffs. Like the spades, I think are gonna show up here as bluffs as well.
Yeah, and on the others, on the flip side, since he has so much value, I mean, we just talked about all the value that he has. Normally in this type of situation, you check to induce your opponent to bluff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this particular case, he doesn't really have to bluff because he's got all that value that he still could be betting.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, some of that value might just prefer to check back
Right.
and realize his equity. So now you question, well, if I bet, I can get value from a lot of what he would call bluff catchers,
Right.
which are those ace 10, ace 9 type hands. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like a coin flip, isn't it?
Yeah, and what's it, like I think part of this is also like, okay, I think that if I check here on the value side, I think all the sets are gonna bet and just go like they're willing to go broke with a set here, which is great. And I think that probably the two pairs with the ace are probably also willing to, even though it's a four liner, there aren't that many threes in my range. There's some, but like, I think they're probably willing to go with those. The big question I had is, what does ace queen do here? Does ace queen just be like, just check back, or does it bet? And I think that's where you're going to get into the opponent dependent sort of scenario.
Well, he knows that you don't have ace queen beat with any ace.
Right. Right.
You'd have to have some weird 4-5 two pair or 7-4 two pair or something like that he would be afraid of with ace queen. So yeah, I don't know. What did you do? Oh, you did check.
I did check. And our opponent shoves into us, which
yes.
was a very welcome sight. And I still didn't know while I mean I was very grateful that this happened. I snap called it, but even as I did it, I was like, I don't know. I think I'm gonna check here, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do. And we call, of course. Now, I will ask you this. What do you think he has?
I think he has a big ace.
Mm-hmm. That's
ace king, ace queen type hand.
Yeah, that's what I was targeting.
Wow.
He has 8-10 of clubs.
Wow.
8-10 of clubs. for this
Air.
goes against the Rob Washam they always have it philosophy.
That's total air.
So I actually that I was stunned to see this. I can understand why you'd want to turn it into a bluff, I guess, because it has obviously no showdown value, but boy, yeah, that one did surprise me to see that was even showing up here. I think
Wow.
they needed to give up on the turn once they didn't have their back door. Once I had responded and they didn't have their backdoor clubs in play or anything like that.
Yep.
Uh, this was a
Well, they had a
spot that
gut
need.
shot.
Yeah, true, 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 true. They
But
did.
yeah, that's really that's way out of bounds.
Yep. So
Well, if you had bet, he would have folded.
yeah, exactly. So I did actually. This is the one of the reasons for checking is we allow our opponent to show up with bluffs when
Yep.
whereas we bet they can't really have bluffs. So that's one of the benefits of this. And when we have such extreme value, we can capture both the value from their bluffs and from their perceived value, which it has no value because we have the
Right.
basically the nuts. We don't have the nuts, but we have essentially the nuts here.
Essentially, and that's because we say we can't he can't be there with 6-8. But
Right.
as after seeing that hand, he could be.
Yeah, actually, it made me rethink. I was like, oh my god, because like I was like, oh, I've got this hand is mine. But after I saw this, I was like, oh, actually, I could have lost this hand pretty easily. Could have had 3-6 or 6-8 or something. So,
Yeah.
um, anyway, well, any more thoughts on that hand or how to extract value on rivers?
No, I think we talked about, the things that we need to consider when we're deciding whether we should bet or not.
Mm-hmm.
And the things we need to consider is what is our value hands versus what is our bluffing hands, and then look at it from their point of view. What are their value hands versus their bluffing hands?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he made a mistake though, because a lot of people will say, well, the only way I can win this hand is by bluffing.
Yeah.
And that's not what you should be telling yourself
Yeah.
when you arrive there.
Yep.
You need to be bluffing with some sort of blocker value,
Mm-hmm.
something that makes sense.
Yep.
8-10 does not make sense as a bluff.
Yeah, because otherwise you end up you just end up over bluffing. If you reach
Yep.
if you're finding yourself reaching rivers where you're just always saying the only way I can win is dot dot dot, you're gonna end up because there's a lot of situations where the only way you can win is dot dot dot. And the problem is that you're not gonna win all that often, especially it's a pretty strong thing for a big blind to call a double barrel in a pretty big blind, even though there's an ace on this board, this is a pretty big blind friendly sort of board. And so, yeah, if you're finding yourself saying that to yourself a lot, try to go through some of the kind of logic we were talking about, like what is my value, what are my bluffs, what are my opponent's value, what are their bluffs, and how do the two sort of mix together. That's going to help you construct your bluffs in a more reasonable way than, well, I got to kind of out of desperation, like there's no other way I can win this.
Right. Right.
All right, well, with that, Rob, thanks again as always for what you do. Thanks to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for sponsoring us and for sponsoring the Forums edition. And as always, thanks you to you, the listener. We couldn't do this without you. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we'll see you again next time.
I didn't hear the outro music.